Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to customize this bear base. This is a blank bear base, the second one of this stash that I actually had. And some of you may remember I already customized one of them as like a deer-esque creature. And in this case I really wanted to keep the bear aspect of this one. So I went into like my Pinterest board, search for inspiration, and there was a lot of gardening stuff appearing because it's summer and a lot of people spend time in their gardens taking care of plants and things like that. So I decided to fully lean into it. I wanted to start out with the shirt and I wanted this like knitted style. So I decided to scour my old socks and I found these socks. And these are like Christmas themed, but they're actually the least Christmas themed I have, because for some reason all the like old socks I've kept that are actually broken are Christmas themed. Probably because they had some really cute motifs and they were not like as worn out as some others. Either way, I started out by cutting off the hem part or the elastic part, and I then glued over like the rest to make sure nothing frays. And this is gonna be the color. And then I just like measured the length by eye that I need, and I cut off the sock with my scissors before deciding that I also need to cut it open in the back because the head and the legs would be too thick to like pull it over. So I decided to use Velcro like in most of my other like doll projects. And like you will not be able to see it much because it will be in the back and hidden, but it should also like make sure that the shirt will sit nicely and actually look like a tight-fitting, nicely knitted shirt. Now the body was a bit more cone-shaped, so I had to like trim it off at an angle in the back, but again you will not be able to see it that much. It just will have a slight curve on one side. Then decided that I wanted to have like a lower hemline, so I cut part of this elastic off that my sock still had and I sewed it on, and then I also sewed the edge over to like have a very clean edge because in this case like both edges would fray quite a lot, so I needed to secure them somehow. And I also made sure to apply some of my Yoo-Hoo all-purpose glue all around. It's the same glue I used for my other projects for mostly like hemming doll clothes and things like that. And it works really, really well for this kind of stuff, at least for stuff that you don't wash. I wouldn't actually use it for like clothes you make for yourself. For that there's things like Fray Check that will definitely hold up in the wash and not break down and things like that. But for doll clothes, like I used it for my first doll project and I used it for some that I didn't film, and some of those are like 5-6 years old and none of them have shown any sign of wear, so you know I will keep using this glue because again it's easy, it's nice to use, and it also dries very quickly. Next up actually were the sleeves, so I measured 2 long strips. I tried to match the pattern of them, folded them over and then cut an S-curve. And this S-curve is just that like the lower part of the underarm will like sit nicely. It's like basically a little more rounded there to make it sit more flat. And then I'm starting out by sewing it from the top all the way to like the middle side without closing the sleeve fully, as you can see. And that is just because when you sew it and you already close the sleeve, like sometimes you have either excess fabric or not enough fabric to like not have it bunch up. So I like to, you know, also with my own clothes, first sew the armhole, the round part, and then sew the rest of the sleeve. This is just like most cases looks way like more even and smooth and things like that. So once I've sewn the sleeve, I also wanted to add another piece of this like elastic. So I actually glued this one on to like keep it from being too thick, and then just with some tiny stitches I closed the opening. And here you can see I'm actually having the stitches on the outside, and that is because I wanted to fold this over. I purposefully sewed it on backwards so that I can glue it over and it would look really nice. And once I finished one sleeve, it was time for the other sleeve, and afterwards I finished the top. I just need to add the Velcro later, but I decided to do that once I also add the Velcro to the pants. And for the pants I actually found this fabric. This is just like some strengthened felt. So this felt is like not like your normal craft felt. It's more for sewing projects, so it has actually like a mesh in between the felt layers, just to stabilize it, even though it's really thin. And all I did again was cut a fitting strip, mark the size of the pants with this marker. This is just like a metallic marker. I like to use this for darker fabrics because it shows up really nicely. And then I basically copied it before sewing the leg holes together. And all I did in this case was like make 2 legs without like any too fancy thing, and then obviously leave the parts where they would join like around the belly open. And once I've sewed both of them, here you can see when I put them onto the figure, it like fits perfectly with like slight overlap. And I'm actually going to use this overlap in the front to make the zipper detail, and in the back it's gonna help me to have the Velcro, you know, not show. It gives me just some extra fabric to attach that properly. And once I had the pieces like glued a little bit, I went in and sewed like first from like the middle of the underside where I knew the Velcro like wouldn't be, and then like all the way towards the top. And I'm actually using some really straight running back stitches, making sure that they really look straight, because these are going to be part of the embroidery that I'm going to do to these pants. So I'm sewing like straight up the seam, and then I'm doing like a little curved line, as you can see here, for the zipper part, before adding some like side seams and some pockets. And once I turn them around, you can see, I mean, the side seams are a tiny bit unclean, but you will hardly notice when he has the pants on. And the front looks really nice with all this embroidery. I was debating if I wanted to fold the legs over for the boots to fit, but then I just decided I'm going to put them on top because I didn't want to add any bulk for the boots to have to fit on top of. Now the pants at this point obviously weren't done. Like I needed a belt part, and then like the belt itself and the buckles that will hold it. So I started out by cutting another strip of this fabric, gluing it on top, making sure to leave the back open again for the Velcro. And then I made a belt, and sadly my camera cut out for that, but I basically like picked up a strip of like, I guess it was some kind of leather like band that was as decoration for something. I just found it in my stash as like a leftover, and I made sure to like cut like a tiny triangle from one side, then add a fake like belt buckle that I made out of some wire, and then I just glued it on like permanently on both sides. Cut the end open so that again the Velcro part would be left open, and then I glued on and sewed on the like little holder things for the pants on top. And when I tried on the shirt, I noticed the like lower hem was way too bulky, so I decided to just remove it, since these would basically like be hidden by the pants anyways. And I just again like made sure to like stop it from fraying with my Uhu glue, and then I trimmed off some of the like back like pattern excess like strings just to clean it off a bit, and with that it actually fit perfectly underneath the pants. Next up, it was time for the boots, and it was really hard to figure out how I'm gonna make them. And then I remembered I still have a lot of Warbler from other projects left, so I picked up a scrap piece And I cut out 2 strips that I'm going to form for the wood, and then I cut out a sole piece that I just marked, and I wrapped this foot in some aluminium foil just to, you know, be able to peel off the Worbla, because Worbla is sticky. If it was touch the fabric or the plastic of the figure, I think it would actually merge. And then I just used my heat gun, being careful to not burn myself, so I'm using like my scissors to hold the piece, and just melting everything so that I can shape it. And the first shoe, like the roundover part, was not really fitting too well, so I had to piece things together and things like that, and it didn't turn out smooth at all, but I still kind of went with it. I just had to go with a lot of back and forth with my heat gun, fixing some holes and things like that. But yeah, for the second one I finally had the technique down, so I started off with the sole, and then I carefully heated only the middle of the long piece, formed that around the front part of the foot, before carefully going along each side, forming that to the foot. This would make sure that the Worbla would melt evenly and I didn't have any spots that would cool too much before I actually could shape them, because that was an issue with the other one, and then when I remelted it, the Worbla got so thin in some spots that it made holes. So this was the fix I found for that, and then I just overlapped it, blended it in the black, blended it in the sole, and then I added a second identical sole just to give it like a bit more of a straight look, and that worked out really well. And then in the end I just repeated that for the other boot, because yeah, again, it didn't look good at all for the first try. And for the color I decided to go with, like, you know, since it's like rubber boots, I decided to go with this like shiny, kind of shimmery blue. I just looked through my nail polishes basically, inspecting which like color would fit well, and this blue just fit perfectly. Also, it will give it this like lacquer or like rubber-esque look, hopefully, with its shine and all the finish that the nail polish had. I already used this for my previous dolls, and I really like the look of it. I think it's such an easy way to like get like this like really shiny shoe look, and a really even coloring. And then lastly, like a lot of these rain boots have this like elastic or like adjustable, like knottable string on top with some fabric, just to make sure you can tie it around your pants so the dirt wouldn't go in through the top as much. So I wanted to add that too, plus like it will cover the edges a bit nicer, because clearly like they don't look as even. But yeah, I really always like to add some details to my pieces anyway, so this was perfect. So I picked up this like yellow string, just as a contrast string, added like a bit of like black fabric around it, glued that on, and then I added some lighter toned nail polish around the tips to make it look like the metal clamps that would secure them in place. I didn't really have any silver or white nail polish, so you know, this cream tone was decided on to like look the best. And then I also wanted to make this guy a hat, and I didn't film the whole process here. This was just like a freehand crochet until it fits kind of thing. Started out with a magic loop, made a circle until the ears were there, and then I like crocheted back and forth on both sides to make like triangles that I then joined back together basically to get the right shape. And then I made like a little part that could be turned over by just going into the outer loop, part of the loop, and I would make sure that like the part of the like the straight part of the hat, the rim would like sit really nicely. And in the end I had a really nice hat. Again, not filmed much because it was like more of a freehand relaxing project where I was watching some movies. But yeah, it actually worked out really well. Next up, it was time to customize the actual figure. So I tried to use my Dremel to add some texture because I wanted to have some fur details, but the plastic was so soft it melted, so the edges became like really frizzy and it didn't look good at all. And since this is like questionable Chinese plastic, I also didn't want to use my hot like burning iron, you know, my wood burning iron tool that I have, because I just didn't want to breathe in any like toxic fumes and things like that. So I decided to just leave the texture out. And the texture I already did is in the back of the head. It's gonna be covered by the head anyway, so I wasn't worried at all. Next up, I wanted to accentuate the bear details a little bit more, so I mixed up some epoxy sculpt. And I made some little balls. First of all, I wanted to add some like protruding eyes, and this took a couple tries until I got them right, so you will see me go back and forth here a bit. But once I had the right size, I made basically like tic-tac shapes, pressed them in, and then smoothed them out with water, and like made sure they are evenly shaped with my silicone shaper tool. And with that, the eyes were done. I didn't want to add any eyelids or any other detail. This bear should be really simple, because I already added so many details in the clothes and things like that. So, you know, simple sometimes. It's best to not like overtake like the already made things. Next up, I added the like snout part a little bit more, so I just rolled out some balls of the epoxy and then placed them underneath the nose before like blending them into the face, leaving like the overhangs on the bottom where the mouth would be. And I also like made sure to get the nose back out with the details so it wouldn't be covered up too much. And then I also had a lot of this clay left over, so I wanted to add some more details. First around the ears. These would poke out of the head so you would actually see them. So I wanted to add some like longer like fur parts with like adding just some wormy dealies that I then smudged down into triangles shaped, and then I added like a lot of this like fur texture with my stylus. And then the rest of the day I decided to give him like a lock on the middle of his forehead. Again, the head will cover a lot of this, but I hope that this like tiny hair detail will like mimic that this bear has like styled his fur in a way that looks like, you know, hair, just like a bit more human-esque to give him a bit more of this like humanoid character that he clearly has. And with that, after that took 24 hours to harden, I could finally prime it. So I mixed some gesso with some back paint, and I got this gray paint out of it just as a base coat. This will mean that I don't have to add a second like darker layer on top. And once I tried, I went and grabbed my brown acrylic paints, and I started with like a darker base coat. I'm going to try and mimic the fur texture or like the fur optics, so I decided to go in with this like reddish brown first, let that dry as a base, and then I picked out a small fan brush that was already a bit worse for wear, and I basically painted the paint on very dirtily. And what I mean with that is I basically like put the lighter orange tone and the brown I already used like on a palette, just dip my brush in it like very randomly without mixing them, and then I make sure to like go in one direction, like how the fur would stagger on top of each other, starting from the bottom of each piece, or from the like neck of the head up to the top, and same with the torso, the arms and the legs. And in the end it actually left a decent like fur texture, because like since the colors didn't quite mix, it looked like they were changing like fur colors, like changing bits of fur, so to speak, and that worked out super well with what I was going for. And then it was time to add some of the details, so I started painting the eyes, started painting the nose in like this darker brown. I'm going to change that to an even darker black tone later, but for now this will suffice. I already like messed up a little bit by like painting onto the face, but I could just go back with some water and fix that later. As for like the other fur details on the front of the head and on the ears, I used like the same dark brown before like using a bit of water to make like the darker paint flow into the recesses a little bit. And then I just wiped it off with my fingers to, you know, highlight the raised parts a bit back again. Kind of like when you do a wash, just a bit more thickened up in this case. Started with giving the eyes some brown tones, and then I was wanting to add irises, but I really didn't like how it looked. So instead I waited for this paint to dry, added some bear paws in pink just with my ball stylus, and then I painted the eyes completely back, and so did I with the nose. And then I added some like brown under the eye, like lights, you could call them. And with these I just wanted to have like a little bit of a suggestion of eye color. Then I went back in with black, framed the eyes a bit before going back into the middle to add the pupils. And then I decided I don't like it, so I went again over it with a brush, blended like the lower part of the color out, and this actually gave it a really nice effect. It still had the hint of like brownish eye color, but most of the like eyes were pretty dark. So I just added the white highlights, decided to leave it as is and not like try and fix the eyes for worse, because at this point I was actually quite happy with them. And then all that was left was give it a little wash to like unify all the colors I chose, and then add 2 thicker layers of gloss varnish. This is just some acrylic gloss varnish to the nose and the eyes. Frankly speaking, I don't really like to use UV resin because it tends to yellow after a while and things like that, and I just wanted to, you know, have this more like simple project that doesn't need like maintenance or to restore it in like a darker place. And I've had that with like a lot of resin. After like 4 or 5 years it tends to yellow, even if it says that it wouldn't. So, you know, for like longevity, and since I want this figure to be able to display it on my windowsill without like having to worry of any changes, gloss varnish, any acrylic type works best in my opinion. And then lastly, it was time to make the apron. I used some like fake leather here in this lighter tone. I wanted to like mimic the hat a little bit, just to make it look like he bought some like nice and similar looking gardening equipment, or like gardening clothes in this case. And it would also match the tips of the laces that I gave the boots. So I cut out like this very simple shape, made sure that it fits, and then added a tiny little pocket. And I also wanted to add some sewn on details and also like some, you know, thread to make sure that the glued over parts would actually hold pretty well. So I actually poked in some holes because I found like going through this fabric or this faux fur with a needle without pre-poking holes, it sometimes means the needle will be like diverted from its straight path and it comes out uneven. And I really wanted this to look like leather stitching, so I wanted this to look even, so, you know, pre-poking holes helped. It got a tiny bit wonky, but that's totally fine. Like, it just adds to the like, I guess like worn, used, maybe handmade charm that it has, I think. And then I wanted to add just a tiny flower on the front pocket, just to give it, you know, a bit more detail, to highlight the pocket a bit and to make the apron look less bland. So I just went in with some yellows, oranges, went back and forth, blended them, and again, these are just normal acrylics. I could have used fabric paint here, but since this is a doll, I'm not really worried about like, you know, I'm not going to wash it, I'm not going to clean it with anything harsh, so this will last for quite a while again. And then lastly, once I painted this, I'm going to add some string on top of this apron and finish this piece off. And with that, the figure is finally done actually. So let's move on to the final reveal of this project. overall, I have to say I'm really in love with how the spear turned out. I love how his clothes look. I especially am really happy with how the pants turned out. And I think the boots look super cute, and the little hat. And although it like doesn't really keep its shape that much, I think the hat definitely adds like this out in the garden in the sun, like working kind of aesthetic. And I have to admit, honestly, the hat was the hardest part, because like the way the head is shaped and the way I wanted it to sit and like have the ears poke out doesn't really conform that well with like crocheting. But yeah, I think it turns out super cute, and it definitely looks like it's a proper gardening hat, and it perfectly shows the little like swoop of like hair pretty well that I wanted to highlight anyways. So yeah, overall I think this guy turned out perfect, like practically exactly how I imagined him, and he definitely gives off like a just like cozy like bear living in its own place, maybe gardening sometimes aesthetic, though without the like apron he definitely looks like just like a very calm, nice gentleman, you know. A kind that just maybe like sits in a rocking chair, reads a book, things like that. And that is precisely the vibe I wanted to go for here, so I'm super happy I could achieve that. And I'm also super happy with how the fur texture turned out, even though I couldn't like actually like engrave or emboss the texture as I wanted. So yeah, overall this turned out perfectly. Anyways, let me know in the comments down below what you think of this little guy, and let me know if you have a figure like this, what would you make this into? Like what kind of customization would you give it? And as always, I hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye bye!